Okay, so I'm going to go ahead and get started. Greetings, my name is Kat Steele and I will be moderating this session. I'd like to start today's session off with a quote. If you can change the way you look at things, the things you look at change. For those of you who are new to our functional webinars, we want to welcome you in this healing journey that you've undertaken for yourself, your family, and your friends. Thank you all for being part of our wellness community. We realize that despite your busy schedule, you've opted to join us and participate in this webinar to help yourself, your family, your community live happier, healthier lives. Last webinar, we discussed the root causes of irritable bowel syndrome. So if you would like to view that recording, you can go ahead and visit www.theholistichealing.org, and there's a video library that has a YouTube icon where that YouTube icon will take you to our YouTube channel where you can subscribe to see our future webinars as well as our previously recorded webinars. Also, really exciting, we have a new Instagram, which is, the handle is @restorative_lifestyle, where you can engage with messages and stay motivated on your healing journey, and you can get some tips on that for your healing journey as well. And we also have a Facebook page that will help inform you about our posts and our future webinars, just in case you don't have an Instagram. So we would now like to ask that you please keep your microphones on mute, and please type your questions in the question and answer section rather than the chat area. It'll be easier for us to answer the questions. And also, we are going to try to answer as many questions as possible during this webinar. And the topic for today that we'll be discussing is how to lose weight using a whole person approach. So without further ado, I'd like to introduce Dr. Nadia Ali. Dr. Nadia Ali is the founder of functional integrative medicine practice, Functional Holistic Healing. She's been practicing for 18 years, board certified in internal medicine specialty, board certified in integrative holistic medicine, board certified in the American Board of Integrative Medicine, a fellow of the American College of Physicians, a member of the Institute of Functional Medicine, and she has certifications in the areas of nutrition, mind-body, Ayurveda, and Chinese medicine. You can learn more about her practice at www.theholistichealing.org. And I'm really excited because Dr. Ali now gets to introduce my mom.
Thank you. Thank you so much, Kathleen. It is actually a privilege and honor to introduce Christine. And I think the reason why she is one of my favorite patients is because I personally am inspired by women who actually never give up. If you have a dream, then the only way you can achieve what you want is if you pursue it. And you consistently pursue it till you achieve what you want. And then when you achieve it, you don't let go of it. Because most of us, once we are close to it or when we achieve it, then we kind of just leave it. And health is not an outcome, it's a journey. And so she started her journey with a search. She continued the search till she achieved it. And now she continues to work on it to sustain it. So without much ado, I'm going to tell you a little bit about her, and then she will tell you her story. So she worked in pharmaceuticals for about 32 years. She loves hiking and traveling. She is really passionate about scuba diving. Married for about 50 years. And of course, Kathleen is her joy. So with that, I want Christine to tell us her story and inspire all of us.
Thank you. My name is Christine Steele, and when I was asked to speak on obesity, I have to say I never thought I was obese. I'm 5'10", and yes, I hit 225 pounds, but the last diet I had been doing for more than 2 years, I had managed to drop down to 160. So I thought I was finally getting better. My whole life, I would try diets, all to try and control my weight. I've always been physically active while playing tennis and more than 40 years, which is why I continue to try that find that magic diet so I could be my best. During my search for the perfect diet, I spent so much time even researching Amish farms for organic products and vegetables, organic dairy, doing things like bone broth. I made my own deer broth, which all seemed to work until I tried to get off the bone broth and get back onto regular foods, dairy, meat, and vegetables. Even after I dropped almost 50 pounds, I had an occlusion of the eye, which my specialist warned me this was a possible sign of an impending stroke. When I was asked to speak about my journey, I started thinking maybe obesity shouldn't correlate to how much weight, but maybe I should question myself, what's making me so sick? And why am I getting these bad results even when I'm losing the weight? You know, from the time I was born, till I was a teen, I battled irritated bowel syndrome, and I managed it with psyllium adophilus capsules and Pepto-Bismol. It was one or the other. My oncologist could never really explain why my low platelets. And my GP put me on cholesterol medication while still warning me that my cholesterol, my glucose numbers were getting really high. So I refused to get on pharmaceuticals because I knew all the side effects that came with pharmaceutical medications. And I was really trying and hopeful to find someone that would try and heal my gut without prescriptions. So a friend of mine and I started researching functional medicine doctors, which is how I came to find Dr. Ali. It's been about 2.5 years and my weight has been stable. I no longer take cholesterol medication. My blood pressure is normal. My bowels are for the first time regular. And I don't mean regular every 4 days, I mean regular. And I no longer worry about diabetes, stroke, or platelets. My husband, who is my cook and has embraced this new way of getting healthy, has lost more weight than I have. Now we can both walk without losing our breath. Our aspirations are to hike every national park in the US. Thank you so much, Dr. Ali.
Thank you so much, Christine. And I think that we say that pictures speak louder than words. And it was so true that you guys have done a phenomenal job. And I really hope and I pray that everybody who is on this healing journey is able to achieve that. So that's amazing. Thank you. Thank you so much.
So, Dr. Ali, why are we so concerned about obesity?
So the reason why we are concerned about obesity is because now we have reached an epidemic level of obesity in this country. When you have 2 out of 3 people who are obese, and it is not something which is a problem just with the adult population. We're talking about children now. 1 in 6 children actually suffer from obesity. And we also know now that 78 million people are affected, and we are expecting more of them to be affected. So if you see right now, US has been hit hard by COVID-19, and not only the numbers have been high, but we have seen more hospitalizations, we have seen more severe cases. And one of the underlying reasons is because we know that if you are obese, then your risk of hospitalization actually triples. So one of the reasons why it has hit us so hard is because of the underlying epidemic that we are facing. And now it is more than clear that if we do not address the problem, then we are looking to live more sicker lives. And we are looking at a healthcare cost going even further up. So obesity is right now the leading cause of death, with 300,000 people dying every year. And the unfortunate part is that while all the other developed countries are reporting an increase in longevity, US is the only developed country which is now witnessing a reduction in the lifespan by about 1 year, starting at age 40. And this is being attributed to obesity. Not only that, we know that When you are obese, then you reduce your life expectancy by 6 to 14 years. And so it's clearly a problem. And if we do not address it today, tomorrow our kids are going to be the ones who are going to be affected by it.
So how do we define obesity?
So one of the biggest problems has been that, we are still, some of us are still using BMI, body mass index, as a way to define obesity, which is a problem. It is a problem because if you look at somebody who is a weightlifter, he or she will always be obese because they will always have a lot of lean mass, and lean mass is heavier than fat mass. So obviously their weight to height ratio will be elevated. So basically we are misclassifying a lot of people. And then you would have somebody who's completely lean in their arms and their legs, and the only place where they have the fat is their belly. And we would say, well, this person has a normal BMI, but that's misclassification, because this is the person who will get all the complications of obesity, which is the reason why World Health Organization, WHO, said that BMI is not the way to look at obesity. They said we have to look at waist to hip ratio, because the primary issue is visceral obesity. And visceral obesity is fat around the belly. And that is where came the concept of apple belly versus pear belly. So apple belly is when your fat is around your belly. And the pear shape is basically, there are certain cultures in which women have bigger thighs and bigger hips, for example, African American culture. So that does not increase your risk of complications. And so it's very important that when we look at obesity, we look at it from the waist to hip ratio, because we are considering visceral obesity. In women, a waist to hip ratio of more than 8.5, and in men, more than 0.9 is considered viscerally obese. There are waist cutoffs for Caucasians, a male with a waist of more than 40 inches, and women with a waist more than 35 inches is considered viscerally obese. In Asian community, the size is different. For men, it is more than 35.5, and for females, it's more than 31.5. And this is an extremely important concept to consider, because we know that if you have a normal weight woman with a waist size of 35 inches or above, she is at 3 times more risk of heart disease compared to a normal weight woman whose waist is smaller than 35 inches. So clearly this woman is a normal BMI. And this woman would be missed if you just looked at the BMI. So this is not the way to look at obesity. So we have to redefine what do we call obese.
How do you measure visceral obesity in your office?
So in our office, what we do is we have this machine. It's called bioelectrical impedance analysis. The brand that we have is InBody, is one of the, this is actually one of the most precise brands that you can get. Now, what this is that you use electricity to look at the amount of lean mass, the amount of fat mass, and the amount of body water that you have. You scan on it, and then they ask you to hold the handles. You hold the handles, and that way they use electricity for the measurement. And the reason why it's important to look at that is because it tells us about the visceral fat. So if you look at this picture, this tells you what I'm talking about. So you see this orange area is the muscle, okay? This is the abdominal muscle. And there is fat that is outside the muscle. This fat is actually subcutaneous fat. We are not worried about it, okay? Because this mass is just underneath the skin. That's why it's called sub, meaning under, cutaneous means skin. What the problem is this purple area, because this is the mass which is under the muscle, but it's right next to the liver, the spleen, the organs, and we also find it around the heart. This is the fat which we call as visceral fat, and this is what contributes towards the inflammation. So we look at visceral fat, we look at subcutaneous fat, we look at lean mass, which is your muscle mass, and then we look at body water. Now, why are we looking at body water? So remember that 70 to 80% of our body is made up of water, but that water is inside the cells, okay? When somebody has swelling, the water that is present in the inside of the cell actually goes out. And that is what we call extracellular body water. And that means that the body is swollen. You are carrying a lot of excess water because of the underlying swelling. So that is how we are able to determine what's going on. So for example, here is a person that you would say is completely normal body type. Why? Because if you look at the visceral fat, it's completely normal. So they don't have extra visceral fat. The subcutaneous fat, which is under the skin in the arms and in the legs, is also normal. Look at the lean mass. The lean mass is higher than the fat mass, which is precisely what we want to see, because you need lean mass. It is this lean mass which protects you. It's where a lot of your metabolic activity happens. The more lean mass you're going to have, the less insulin resistant you are going to be. You need more lean mass because this also helps you with balance. This helps prevent arthritis. This is where if you have better lean mass, that means you'll have better bone mass. You're going to have better teeth. You're going to have better gums. So this is what is, you can call it your buffer, your reservoir. If you're going to get sick, this is what's going to protect you. And you can see that this person has a really nice lean mass, amazing. And you can see that the extracellular to total body water is completely normal. There is no swelling here. This is awesome. Now, if you get to the next picture, this is a person who is overweight. But even if this person is overweight, I will not be worried about this person. Why? Because look here. So this person has some visceral fat, but it's normal. She has subcutaneous fat under the skin. It's in her arms and her legs, but I am not worried about it because this is not the fat which is going to create a problem. She has good amount of lean mass, which is very good. And she has a completely normal extracellular to total body water. Now, I would like her to lose some of the fat and have her lean mass higher, but I'm not worried about this person. Now, here is the next person, which we will call it high risk. Why? Look at the visceral fat, OMG. So this is extremely high visceral fat. This fat is much higher than the lean mass, although this person has normal lean mass, but the fat is much higher than that. And here you can see extracellular to total body water ratio is completely normal. So in this person, I would say this is where I would focus on. Okay, so this is the first high risk category. Now, there is a second high risk category, which is worse than this. And this is what it is. So now, remember that you will see that I've written here overweight, obese, or normal, because these individuals, even if they have high visceral obesity, they can still be completely normal weight. They may not necessarily overweight or obese. Okay, so just keep that in mind. So this person is actually in a much worse state than the first one. So yes, they have high visceral obesity, but their problem is they have no lean mass. This person, actually, if you see them, you are saying, oh, this person has so much mass, but the truth is that's not true. They are actually malnourished because they do not have lean mass. This person will also have issues with osteoporosis. This person will also have issues with gum recession because they do not have what they actually need. So apparently they may be obese, but in all honesty, they're actually malnourished. And the good thing, at least here, is that they have extracellular to total body water is completely normal, which means we don't find swelling. And now this is the last category that I'm showing you, which you can call it the real worst scenario. So this is visceral fat, which is elevated. There is no lean mass, but look at this extracellular to total body water. Now there is a lot of water weight this person is carrying. And the reason why this person is carrying all this water is because there is swelling in the body. And that is where, so when this person will lose weight, when you are able to address the inflammation, you will see this person will lose weight very quickly. As the inflammation will go down. Why? Because they have a ton of water weight. So a lot of times when people say, you know, my weight has not changed, but my patients would say, my weight has not changed, but you know, I feel like my clothes fit better. Why? because you lost water weight. And water doesn't have a lot of weight. So yes, but you haven't lost any fat mass, you haven't gained any lean mass, but you have reduced your water, which was basically the swelling that you had. So that is basically the way you categorize a body, and that is how you define obesity. And then depending on what you see, the amount of lean mass and the visceral obesity and the water, you can actually decide, what route do you want to take? What could be the underlying reason why this is happening? And you may also be able to target physical activity accordingly. So this is very helpful information that we would like to get about any patient and every patient who has either high visceral obesity, suspected high body mass index, or even low body mass index, because it's even helpful then to know, what are you losing? Do you have lean mass that you have lost, or have you lost fat mass, and go from there.
So, Dr. Ali, if somebody wants to do this type of analysis, do they have to be your patient in order to have this information?
No, they can just come in and they can have their body composition analysis, and they can look at the paper that actually writes down, that actually has what is the visceral obesity level and what's the lean mass, and it also tells them what's going on with the total body water to extracellular body water. So no, you don't necessarily have to be a patient. You can definitely come and get that test done and then see where you stand and know what kind of body type you have.
Why are we failing to control the epidemic of obesity?
So I think the major reason why the conventional approach has been failing is because there are certain underlying assumptions that we have. And all the assumptions that we have are actually incorrect. And until and unless we can say that we are not going to assume these things, we are not going to be able to reverse this epidemic of obesity. So the first assumption that we have is that fat is a dormant tissue, meaning it's just sitting there doing nothing. That's not true. If fat were to be just simply sitting there, and if all fat were the same, then we wouldn't have a lot of issues that's going on with obesity. So that's issue number one. Issue number two is that we think calorie in and calorie out model works. So if you go and talk to anybody in healthcare field, whether it's a physician or a nurse practitioner or endocrinologist, whoever you want to go, they will say, okay, it's about the number of calories you take in, and it's about how much you exercise and you get the calorie out. Now, think about it. Most of us know that eating better and exercising helps weight. This is a no-brainer. But it is not simply just what you eat and what you exercise, because all calories are not created equal. So if all calories are not created equal, then calorie in and calorie out model will not work, because a bag of banana chips and a banana may have similar calories, but they are completely different. So you cannot apply that model of calorie in and calorie out, number one. Number two, the second issue is I have patients who say, Dr. Ali, I eat one meal a day and I work out 1 hour a day. I cannot lose weight. And clearly there is more to the story than just counting calories. And so you have to keep that in mind as well, that this model is not a model because this is too simplistic a model to work. The third issue that we do is we blame the victim. Whoever comes and complains that, like, they have a weight issue, we say, you must not be eating well and you must not be exercising. It cannot be far from the truth. Most people who come to us have already tried 500 diets and they've already tried many ways to exercise. They are coming to you because whatever they have tried is not working. And blaming them is only going to make matters worse. Next thing, if somebody does emotional eating or food cravings, we are very quick to judge them. We tell them, you need to have better self-discipline, etc., etc., etc. This has nothing to do with self-discipline. There are many factors which contribute to emotional eating and food cravings. So you need to be able to address those factors instead of telling that person that they have lack of self-discipline. And then last but not least, we tell people you should go on a healthy diet and you should exercise. If you Google healthy diet, you're going to see on Google 500 people, everybody giving you a different diet that has worked for them. And now they want you to get that. And they are hoping and praying that you would also benefit. So what does it mean to eat healthy? I mean, this is a cliche term, which means nothing. Or if somebody says, go and exercise, what kind of exercise? How much to exercise? When to exercise? How to start? I mean, like when you are saying that just eat well and exercise, and you tell this to everybody, it really does not mean anything. And until and unless you are able to understand and really drill down to what kind of exercise and what kind of diet and why you want that kind of diet, you will not achieve results.
Those are some absolutely wonderful points. And so I'd love to go into them a little bit deeper. So Dr. Ali, would you explain why fat is not a dormant storage tissue?
So if you look at fat, fat is one of the most hormonally active issue, which means that it releases hormones, especially adipokines is what we call the hormones that come out of fat, okay? Adipokines are extremely inflammatory. And this inflammation can be spread throughout the body. And I will talk about all the consequences of adipokines. But there's another hormone that the fat tissue releases, and that is estrogen. So if you know that women who are at 8 to 10 times higher risk of autoimmune diseases than men, you know that the reason for that is estrogen. And that is why it's not a surprise that if you are obese, you are releasing way more estrogen than other women, and then you are at way more higher risk of autoimmune diseases like rheumatoid arthritis, psoriatic arthritis, lupus. Then the adipokines cause inflammation in literally every single organ. For example, they increase your risk of stroke by 24%. They increase the risk of diabetes by 85%. And this is actually a vicious cycle because diabetes is a result of insulin resistance, and insulin resistance causes more inflammation, and then you get more fat, and then you cause more insulin resistance. So this is what we call a vicious circle. The second vicious circle is when you have a lot of fat. That fat accumulates in the liver. And remember, liver is the organ of detox. This is where your cleaning happens. So if your liver is not functioning, because of the fat accumulation, then you are not able to detox. So if you cannot detox, then you create more inflammation. That causes more fat. And again, you are in a vicious circle. So it is very important to understand that a lot of people, once they become obese, they get into one or the other vicious cycle. And then they cannot get out of it, which is the reason why people have such a hard time losing weight. It increases your risk of neurological diseases, and it increases the risk of every condition related to the heart, whether it be blood pressure, heart disease, or high cholesterol. And kidney disease, it increases the risk of kidney disease by 10-fold because kidney disease is primarily a result of inflammation of the kidneys. It increases the risk of cancers by 40% because remember that you cannot have cancer without inflammation. It increases the risk of depression by 21%, bipolar disorder by 47%, and panic attacks by 27%. Why? Because now your brain is inflamed, and that is why this is what is going on there. So clearly, fat is not a dormant tissue. It's a very active tissue.
You mentioned hormones. What is the role of hormones in obesity?
There are actually multiple hormones which play a role in obesity. One of them is cortisol. We know that elevated cortisol can directly cause belly fat. The growth hormone is the second hormone. And this hormone actually, we know that can increase insulin resistance, and it can also contribute to obesity. Insulin is a hormone directly responsible for blood sugar regulation, and it has direct impact on obesity. Thyroid hormone is responsible for metabolic activity of the body. Throughout the body, if your metabolism is going to be reduced, you are not going to be able to use the food that comes inside your body. So abnormal thyroid hormones, and when I say abnormal thyroid hormones, I'm not just talking about T4. Unfortunately, most of the time we check T4, but the active thyroid hormone is T3. So I'm also talking about T3. So a lot of obese patients will have normal T4, but they would have low T3, but nobody checks T3. So they don't know that their T3 is low. The next is estrogen to progesterone ratio. Remember that every single organ of your body has estrogen and progesterone receptors. And you may have heard of women who would say, I started my OCP, oral contraceptive, and I gained 30 pounds. Because hormones can directly affect, especially estrogen can directly affect weight gain big time. So if you have reduced progesterone or elevated estrogen, you are going to get in trouble with weight. The other thing which nobody knows is that oral contraceptives directly affect the liver. And you can actually get liver tumors from estrogen and oral contraceptives. So before you take an oral contraceptive, think twice, because it has a lot of different effects.
You mentioned the calorie in and calorie out method does not work. Why exactly is that?
See, the thing is that it's a very simplistic model to say calorie in and calorie out works, because all calories are not created equal. So what I mean, like the example I was giving was, if you take a banana, banana has fiber, banana has nutrients, okay? If you take banana chips, what's in banana chips? There's no fiber, there's no nutrient, there is a yellow color, dye, which is carcinogenic in nature. They're preservatives because they want to have a shelf life of that banana chips. And they have actually added additional sugar to it. So how is, even though it has the same number of calories as a banana, how is it possible that the banana chips is equal to the banana? It's not possible, because you are consuming two completely different products. So when you are looking at food, you really have to understand more than calories. The second concept, which is very important to understand, is that obesity is not just affected by calories. It is affected by infections. If you have chronic infections, it means you will have a lot of inflammation. So you are going to be obese no matter how many calories you intake or you don't eat anything. If you have liver dysfunction, you are going to have trouble with detoxing. And you are going to have obesity, because this is a protective mechanism. So what most people don't know is that if you have a lot of toxins coming into the system, and that's why you can see there's a toxin category here. And remember that drugs are considered a toxin. So when you take in too many toxins and the body cannot detox, what does the liver do? The liver takes the toxin, puts it into a fat cell and locks the cell up. And say, okay, I'm not going to open you because right now I don't have the capacity to do the cleaning. It's almost like what we do at home. When we don't have time, we put something in one place and we say, oh, we'll get to it when we get to it. But you never get to it, because there's so much stuff coming in that you are never able to get to it, and the fat cells keep on increasing. So it's a protective mechanism. So if you have toxins, then you are going to have obesity issues. If you have hormonal imbalances, you are going to have obesity issues. If you are not able to sleep, we know that it automatically changes your hormonal balance, and then you're going to have obesity issues. Very importantly, if you have had trauma, you have had stress issues, that affects your hormones. So there are a lot of people, who are shift workers, they have a lot of issues with obesity. Why? Because they have problems with sleep, and that affects their hormones. Food sensitivity. So for example, if I tell you broccoli, is it a good food or not? You will say, of course, it's great. And I'll tell you all the benefits of broccoli. But broccoli for somebody is great, but for the other person, it's not great. Because in one person, the body looks at broccoli as friend, and in the other person, it looks at it as an enemy. So even though there's no problem with broccoli, the problem is that how does your body view certain foods? And that's where the concept of food sensitivity comes, that you need to be able to find out if you are sensitive to certain foods. And if you are, then you have to avoid it. And you also have to ask, if something has become sensitive for your body, why has it become sensitive suddenly? Because when you restrict something, then you also restrict the nutrients coming from it. So you don't necessarily want to not be able to eat something healthy. And last but not least, and actually the most important factor, is the gut bacteria. Because you will hear people will say, you know, if I eat a piece of chocolate, I gain 3 pounds. And you'll have the next person telling you, I eat chocolate all day. It doesn't affect me at all. And what is the difference? The difference is in the gut bacteria. And the initial experiments that were done, in one of the experiments, which was, I thought was very interesting, they took a group of fat mice and a group of lean mice. And they fed the poop of the lean mice to the fat mice, and the poop of the fat mice to the lean mice. Now, I know it's gross, but it was done. And what they found was, in 3 months' time, the fat mice became thin, and the thin mice became fat. So exactly what happened? What happened was they changed the gut bacteria of the fat mice and the lean mice. And as soon as the gut bacteria was changed, it changed how the mice handled the food. And so this is a very important concept that should be taken into consideration when you are looking into addressing obesity.
Dr. Ali, could you tell us why blaming the victim makes issues worse?
So this is a study which I think everybody should know. This is a study, it's called an ACE study, or Adverse Childhood Experiences Study. This is a study in which they took 306,000 subjects, over 306,000 subjects, and they looked at 70 studies. And it was very interesting to notice that in 85% of studies, there was a direct correlation between adverse life experiences and obesity. And in 86% of cases, there was a direct correlation between post-traumatic stress disorder and obesity. And I cannot tell you how many times we miss post-traumatic stress disorder. We have a notion that it's only a disorder which hits people who go for the war. That is not true. There are a lot of people who have gone through trauma. They don't even realize the degree of trauma that they have gone through. They don't realize how it's affected them. And this plays a huge role. They found in 90% of studies, there was a correlation between trauma and obesity. And in 85% of studies, there was a direct correlation between adverse life experiences and binge eating disorder. Imagine the person in front of you who's gone through trauma, who's right now having PTSD, who's gone through major life events, and you are sitting there and blaming that person. What good do you think is going to come out of it? You are only adding fuel to the fire. You really need to understand the person and understand how they have developed this relationship with food, or how has that experience affected their coping mechanism, and address it. And that is why blaming the victim is not really going to be helpful.
So if it's not the self-discipline that is to blame for the emotional eating and the food cravings, what is it?
So remember that, if somebody is having emotional eating or food cravings, you have to understand that there are many, many, many reasons. Physiological reasons could be there behind that. For example, if somebody has high cortisol, they will crave for fatty meals. They would crave for carbohydrates. And you will see people looking for chocolate when they're stressed out. Well, there is a reason for that. You also find that sometimes people mistake what is physical hunger, what is emotional hunger, and what is thirst. I have had this experience that when I come from, my exercise, I feel hungry. I'm like, oh my God, I'm so hungry. But then I said, oh, I should have water first. And I would have my water, a couple of glasses. I'm like, oh, I'm not hungry anymore. Well, I wasn't hungry. I was thirsty. And so that is number one. Number two, a lot of times when you're stressed out, you are in need for emotional support. You have emotional hunger. But when you have nobody there to kind of tell you, hey, everything is going to be okay, let me give you a hug, then you are looking for support. And where do you go for support? What's in front of you is a bagel. So you're like, okay, let's just go for this one. Maybe it can provide me some support. So you have to be able to understand, why is this person doing? He or she is trying to help themselves. So find out what's going on and help them. The third thing we see, this especially in women, we see cyclical emotional eating, meaning they would say, as soon as my period comes, I really have to eat something sweet. I have such bad cravings. Or during the ovulation, it's a pretty clear-cut history. Once you keep a food diary, you will see the woman, and the woman will see it, look at the diary and will tell you, yes, that's the time when I am at my worst when it comes to binging. And you know that this is not her, it's the hormones. So fix the hormones. Why are you blaming her for that? Nutritional deficiencies. This is something that I have seen in my own spouse, actually. There was a time on the weekends, since I could only see him on the weekends, he would go to the kitchen every hour. And I couldn't figure out, why would somebody need to eat every hour? And then we found out that he had vitamin D deficiency. We fixed that, and thank God my food was saved, because I was like, my food is finishing like anything, and I couldn't figure it out. And finally, I figured it out as to what's going on. So when you are having nutritional deficiencies, you are going to feel hungry because the body is craving for certain foods. His body wanted vitamin D, but he was giving it everything with the exception of vitamin D. So that is another thing. And last but not least, you have to consider the presence of bad bacteria, whether it be candida or parasites or gut bacteria. And I had this bizarre case, which I cannot forget ever, of this young girl. She was 17 or 19 years old, and her family brought her because they thought she was crazy, but she was not. They had taken her to a therapist and a psychiatrist, and they said there's no eating disorder, nothing. But they couldn't figure out why in the world she would get up at 1 or 2 o'clock in the morning. She would go down to the kitchen, she would have a full meal, and then she would come back and go to sleep. They told her, why can't she eat at the dinner time more? She can eat more. We're not asking her to eat less. But she had to do that, because if she wouldn't be able to sleep. And the reason we found out was that she had a ton of candida, and it was giving her a lot of cravings. So until and unless she would go and have the full amount of food, she would just not feel full enough, and she wouldn't be able to go to sleep. And so you have to understand what's going on, instead of putting all your putting all your problems onto the patient and blaming them or giving them a lecture on self-discipline, because even they know that they need to do better, they just don't know how.
Yeah, that can be really tough. So that comes down to, so why does one size not fit all?
Well, one size cannot fit all, because every diet, so see, no matter which diet you're going to pick, there are certain advantages and there are certain disadvantages. So it's not like, like a lot of times I'm asked, so should I do paleo? Should I do keto? And it's like, what does that mean? You have to look into what are your nutritional needs. The keto works for certain type of people. You have to know what is your genetic predisposition. If somebody is an Eskimo and then you tell them to do a vegetarian diet, do you really think that guy is going to survive? No. So you have to look at, what is going on with this person. You also have to look at what exposures they've had. If they have a chronic infection, they have toxins, you limit their diet a lot, they're already nutritionally deficient. Do you think you're going to go anywhere with it? No, you're not going to. You have to look at hormonal imbalances, and everybody will have a different type of hormonal imbalance. You have to fix that. You have to look at their individual gut bacterial maps. And if you remember what Christine had said, she had said how she had IBS. So she had bacterial imbalance, which was causing a lot of her issues. And so if you fix that, then that is so you have to ask, what does the bacteria need? So right now, you're not just talking about patients' nutritional needs, you're also asking about what kind of bacterial nutritional needs are, because you want the right type of bacteria to grow. So remember that we have more bacterial cells than our cells. So we are more bacteria than us. So you don't have to just look at what you need. You also have to look at the needs of the bacteria in your gut. And that has to be also taken into account. And then very importantly, you have to discuss coping strategies, if they have gone through stress, if they have gone through trauma, if they have gone through childhood experiences, you have to address that, because that is the core which is affecting all the other organs, including gut bacteria. So if you don't address that, then they will constantly be changing their gut bacteria in the wrong way. So you really have to look at the whole picture, and you have to look at as an individual and then decide what you want to do.
What is a whole person's approach to weight loss? What does that look like?
So a whole person's approach to weight loss is simply to consider that person as an individual, as a unique individual. You have to look at each individual's nutritional needs, their food sensitivities, their history of trauma or stress, their toxin exposures, their infections, their genetics, their digestive capacity, their gut bacteria, and the hormonal balances. And then you have to see which variables are applicable in this condition. And then you have to take all the imbalances and you have to correct that. So you have to come up with a customized plan and not treat everybody like a factory would. Like, when you're manufacturing something, it's just like one by one, you do the same thing. You can't do that. That is a whole person's approach to weight loss.
So what are some of the functional tools used for weight loss that can be used by most people?
So the first and most important, I would say, and this is where I think, it takes me a long time to make people love their bodies, because when they come, they look at their belly, they say, look at me, why am I so overweight? I hate myself, this is not good. You have to remember, and you have to be very grateful to your body for being with you, working for you today. The body was there for you yesterday, she will be there for you tomorrow. And so you really have to be able to love it. You cannot ask somebody to change when you're whipping them, when you're forcing changes on them, but when they become your friend, then you can make the changes you want to. So the most important thing is to love your body. When you love your friend, what happens is your friend starts sharing things with you. If somebody thinks you're going to slap them every time they tell you anything, do you think they will tell you anything? No. So the first thing, when you start loving your body, believe me, your body starts telling you what it wants. Then when your friend starts sharing their stuff with you, then you work with your friend. And this is when we talk about people keeping diet diary. This is where this happens. When they start looking at their body, listening to their body, they come to me and they say, Dr. Ali, you know what I found? I found when I do this, this happens. When I do that, I actually lost a pound. The other day I ate that and I actually increased by 2 pounds. And that is when you are beginning to become friends with your body. You have begun to listen to your body. Now you don't need a doctor to tell you what to eat. That's perfect. Now your body is telling you what it needs. So go with it, run with it. And that is what you want. The first thing is that love yourself unconditionally. And you will see that response coming from your body, who will love you in turn. So that is the first thing. Do not hate yourself. Because this body is also you and it's trying its best. You just have to give it what it needs and it will do what you want it to do. Number two, one of the issues with our culture is when we eat the way we eat. Sometimes we are grabbing something, we're running to work, rushing to work. Some people have stuff in the car and they're trying to eat in the car. This is not the way you eat. The idea is you sit down, you look at your food, you look at the colors, you're not watching TV, you smell the food, you taste the food, you chew the food, which is a big problem because nobody chews the food because your digestion starts in the mouth. And then when you are eating the food midway, ask yourself, am I full? If you are, you don't have to finish the plate. A lot of us keep on eating till the plate is finished. You don't have to finish the plate. If you're done, if you feel almost full, it's time, because it takes about 20 minutes from the time your signal goes from the stomach to the brain, and the brain then tells you to stop eating. But if you ask yourself mid-meal and you see that you're almost full, it's time to stop. You stop it, you take your plate to the kitchen, cover it, put it in the refrigerator. That's it, it's done. This is called mindful eating. When you feel like having a snack, you ask yourself, have I had water? Or maybe I should have some water. Is it maybe thirst or is it really hunger? Or you ask yourself, am I stressed out? Is that why I feel hungry? Is it my emotional hunger? Let me take a few deep breaths. Let me give a nice smile. Let me hug myself and see, how do I feel? Do a few breaths and you ask yourself, am I still hungry? Do I still need a snack? If you do, you can definitely have one. But if you feel like, no, I feel fine, you're good. You're already beginning to understand what type of hunger you have. You're beginning to understand when you are thirsty, when you are hungry. So mindful eating is something I suggest we all do. Third thing, I'm not going to give you a prescription for what diet, because remember, I told you there's so many variables, but there's something very simple we all can do. Eat real foods. What does that mean? Do you see pasta growing on the trees? No. Do you see bread growing on the trees? No. Do you see snack growing on trees? No. What do you see growing on trees? Fruits and vegetables. And then you see the grains. So you can have some rice, you can have some quinoa, you can have some vegetables, you can have some fruits. So you are genetically made to eat what is growing out there, not what is being made in the factories. So this is what your genes are. And it's very simple. There is nothing exotic about it. If you will eat real food, which nature has given you, then you will be doing great. When you eat what humans have given you or manufactured for you, because humans have always been imperfect and their products are imperfect. God has always been perfect. Nature is always perfect. So you will never go wrong when you go with nature. So that is what my advice for food is. If there's one thing you can do, that is what you can do. Okay? Follow biological rhythms. You know, if you have a baby, you have noticed, you know, if it's the time for the baby to sleep, it does not matter how many lights are turned on and how many people are yapping away, the baby will go to sleep because it follows its biological rhythm. But we are going to bed at 12 at night. Sometimes we go to bed at 2. Sometimes we're up so late, then we feel hungry, then we eat late hours. If you know that there is a biological clock inside every cell, and the master gland is right here, which is your primary pineal gland is your master clock. Every cell follows the clock, every cell. The cell knows when to release hormone, when to stop hormone. Every organ knows when it's supposed to start, when it's supposed to stop. The brain knows what it's supposed to do during the day, what it's supposed to do. Only humans do not want to listen to the biological clock. And that is when you get in trouble. The moment you are going to go to war with nature is when you are bound to fail. The moment you align yourself with nature, you're fine. Movement. So if you look outside, you look at the trees, see how they move there. Even though they're standing, they're moving their leaves here and there, and the flowers move. Movement. The sun comes out and the moon comes out. Every animal moves. So movement is natural. We are natural beings. We are supposed to move. So when you're sitting there after an hour or so, just go and walk around. Just do some stretching. Even if you're sitting, move. And I'm not asking you to run a marathon, but I'm asking you to do what nature is doing. And nature loves movement, and you should love it too. And so that is, incorporate that in your everyday life. Be aware of it. I put a timer and say every 10 minutes, I'm just going to do some stretching, or I'm just going to stand up, or I'm just going to walk a little bit and then I'll come back and do my work. But incorporate movement in whatever form you like. Fasting. Fasting is a very important tool. It's a very interesting tool because there are many, many, many ways in which we can fast. You know, there's intermittent fasting, which is the time between the breakfast and dinner. There's 5-day modified fasting, which we use in our office. There's water fast as well. Then there are people who do calorie restriction instead of just fasting per se. Then there's a 5:2 model in which you eat for 5 days and you fast for 2 days. And then there's alternate day fasting model. But the important part is, remember, it's a tool. And a tool, it's almost like it's a knife. You know, you give the knife to a butcher and he'll give you the perfect pieces of meat, and you give the knife to somebody who's crazy and he's going to kill somebody, you know, and it's like that. So fasting, if you use it right way, if you have somebody nutritionally deficient and you make them fast, I mean, that poor person is already half dead and you're basically going to completely kill them. But if you use it when the person has what they need in terms of nutrients, if you have done your groundwork, then you use fasting and you will have amazing results. And there's, in some situations, you will have to be fasting under the supervision of a physician. Actually, I would recommend doing it in all situations, especially if you don't know if you have inflammation or you have nutritional deficiencies. All those need to be taken care of. But these are the conditions where definitely you need somebody supervising you. If you have low BMI, you're pregnant or breastfeeding, anybody under the age of 18 because you're growing at that time. If you're on prescription medications, definitely medical conditions. If you have high uric acid, because you can have gout flare up if you're not careful with it. And if you have diabetes, those are the conditions in which you have to make sure that you are under a physician when you're doing that. And this is another tool that we use in our office. It's what we call cocoon or pod or infrared sauna. So this is not the sauna that you get in your regular gyms. It is much higher heat than that. And that is the reason why your head is outside. Because your head houses a lot of organs which are very sensitive, like eyes and ears and nose and your brain. You want to keep that outside. So there is high heat and there is infrared light. Because remember, infrared light actually affects mitochondria, the structures which play a very important role in detox. There's also what we call vibrational massage going on to improve your lymphatics. There is aromatherapy that is there, and there is Himalayan salt as well. So this is what we have been very successful with as part of the protocol, not by itself. It's part of the protocol. It has been very helpful when you're doing other things like diet and other things to kind of change your microbiome and stuff like that. So it's been very helpful if you can do that.
So what other conditions can be treated in the infrared sauna? And how frequently must it be used to see improvement?
So there are a lot of different conditions that we have used it for, because remember that it is working on mitochondria throughout the body. It's working on blood supply and lymphatic supply. It also working on detoxification. So that's why we can use it in high blood pressure. We use it in anxiety. It is very helpful in PMS issues. It's very helpful in autoimmune conditions such as rheumatoid arthritis. It's helpful in insomnia, fatty liver. Also, we've used it in joint pains, chronic fatigue, fibromyalgia. It's actually used in cancer because we know that cancer cells are sensitive to very high heat. We have definitely used it in ovarian cysts very successfully, in irritable bowel syndrome, diabetes, and heart disease are all the conditions in which we have used it.
If somebody is not your patient, can they use it?
Yes, they can use it. And usually the frequency we ask people to do is 2 to 3 times a week.
What are the functional tools that are used by you for your patients with weight issues?
So we use a lot of different tools. We have functional testing that we do to assess the issues that we have discussed before. Changes in lifestyle. When we talk about change in lifestyle, it's not just about what you eat and how much you exercise. It's about sleep. It's about what is it that your subconscious is talking about. You know, it's about stress. It's about trauma. It's about aligning with nature. How do you align with nature? We do give bioidentical hormones when there is need for that. We do detoxification for metals. We address infections. We have professional fasting toolkits that we use. We use mind-body techniques quite a bit. We have customized meal plans. For every patient, it's going to be different. We use botanicals, herbals, and peptides. And then we have oral intramuscular and intravenous nutrients that we use to help with the nutritional status of the patient. So we have a lot of different tools that we use, and everybody is going to have a different protocol.
So that sounds like a pretty large undertaking, all those different things. So what are the first things that one should focus on when they're looking into this?
So the first thing I would tell you is plan, plan, plan. So remember, you don't have to do this tomorrow. Okay, it's not about pace at all. And this is something I'm sure you would have learned from Christine. It's not about pace. It's about consistency. It's about persistence. So you plan and you say, I'm going to take one small step. For first 2 weeks, I'll just do one step. Then I'll add my next step. It's very important that you journal your success because that keeps you motivated. You know that you can do it. And you also journal what you learn because you don't want to make mistakes again. You want to learn from your mistakes. So that is very important. The other thing which I think is critically important is that you have to connect with your soul. Remember that if you cannot disconnect yourself, and we are living in crazy times right now, we talk about COVID-19, but remember that there is going to be an issue after COVID-19. There was an issue before COVID-19 too. Issues can always change and they will always come. But the important part is, can you disconnect? And can you connect with your soul? If you can connect with your soul on a daily basis, and you can kind of tell yourself that I am not crazy, I'm not part of this craziness, I'm disconnected from it. That is extremely helpful for you to ground yourself and to anchor yourself and be able to take the next step. Because if you lose yourself in the craziness, then you cannot do anything. And then most important thing I tell people is that, you have to have a passion in life. You have to have a reason to live. Like we heard Christine say, she wants to, with her husband, go to every park. You have to have a purpose in life. If there's no purpose in life, there's no reason to do anything. So you have to take out some time to do something that makes you happy. You have to laugh. You have to smile. You have to be happy because remember, it's a free medicine available to all, given to you by nature. Take advantage of that. There's no tax on laughing. So you can laugh as much as you want. And you can find things that make you happy. And that you have to do every day, every week, something, because that is what will keep you on the track to what you want to do. And you'll never ever leave focus because you have always disconnected yourself and you've always felt happy inside you. The people who are happy inside themselves are the people who will be most successful in achieving their goals. And this is what I have seen in my clinical practice. The happier the soul, the easier the accomplishment. The more negativity, the more worse and much more slower the path is. Because remember that when mind, body, and soul come in alignment, then there is no impossibilities.
So thank you so much for all the questions today. And we're going to go ahead and answer some of our questions in a few minutes. So I would like to say thank you all for staying with us, and go ahead and get your calendars out. December 5th at 4 p.m. we're cracking the code on fatigue. So we're going to go ahead right into that. So the registration is required. Seats are limited. And our objectives that we're going to be going over is illustrating the role of the mitochondria in chronic fatigue, identifying the role of leaky gut in chronic fatigue, how does the immune dysfunction cause chronic fatigue, how adrenal and thyroid glands interact to create a vicious cycle in chronic fatigue, and what role of nutritional deficiencies in chronic fatigue, what are the role of nutritional deficiencies in chronic fatigue, and how can we reverse chronic fatigue? So if you have any stories or any problems that challenges that you've been running into with chronic fatigue, please send any comments or any even success stories, any wins, please send them to Dr. Nadia Ali at email@theholistichealing.org. So I'm going to go ahead and check out some of the questions. We got a few of them here.
Okay.
So one of the first ones are, what are chronic infections?
So chronic infections are, for example, mold infection. If you have mold infection, a lot of people don't know that they have mold infection, which is very interesting. And the way mold gets into the system is usually by inhalation. And then you have mold infection, the mold toxins keep on being released inside your body. And when it gets released inside your body, then it causes inflammation. And that inflammation goes to every single organ of your body. So a lot of people are living in old buildings. Actually, I had a patient just on Friday. I said to her that you have chronic sinus issues. What could be the reason? She's like, I don't know. And we found out yesterday, she actually had 2 molds growing inside her nose. We have not even done the mold urine test. Just inside the nose, when we looked at it, she had, and this is a woman who has significant obesity. She has a significant anxiety. So imagine that mold toxins can affect a lot of the brain function. So she's a classic case of mold infection. There is also chronic Lyme disease, which can cause this problem. The third thing is the infection could be inside the gut as well. So if you have chronic gut infection, especially candida, chronic candida, so if you see somebody tells you that, they have thick nails, thick fungal nails, or they have dry feet, that's a sign. Or if they tell you they crave carb, that's a sign. Or if they tell you they have brain fog, that's a sign that there could be candida. So chronic candida infection can also cause obesity. Chronic gut infection with parasites or infection with bad bacteria can also cause obesity. So those are the chronic infections that you really have to keep in mind.
Could you define inflammation a little bit more to kind of explain like cellular inflammation and kind of just the role in that?
Okay, so what is inflammation? So I'll give you an example. So let's suppose you have skin, right? If there is a cut in the skin, what's going to happen? It will become red, right? It is going to become swollen, right? And there's going to be pain in there, right? And so when I say inflammation, I say the same things happen inside the body. You will find people will have joint pains and joint aches. They are going to have swelling of their feet or ankles, or they will have water weight that they will gain, okay? And then, so we talk about redness. So you cannot see the redness inside, but what you can see is that you will see certain things going on. For example, if you have inflammation of the brain, then you will find the person will say, I have brain fog, I'm not able to concentrate, I'm losing my memory. If they have inflammation, so for example, the term itis in medicine is used for inflammation. So if I say I have sinusitis, it means inflammation of the sinuses. Rhinitis, inflammation of the nose. Gastritis, inflammation of the gut. So a lot of these people will have arthritis, they will have TMJ issues, they will have gastritis, or they would have sinusitis. So what's going on? Basically, that inflammation is going to different parts of the body, and those organs are getting swollen. Those organs are, you can call them as not functioning because of the water which is going from inside the cell to outside the cell. That is precisely what's going on.
Thank you. I know you had mentioned one of the questions was how you measure the high visceral fat. So, and I also got a question of do you know any of the body analysis machines that are more affordable, the BIA machines?
So no, I don't expect people to get a BIA machine, to be honest with you, because it's such an expensive machine. But what I would suggest to you is that you can actually find out, you can like the one that we have is InBody. And you can go on InBody website. If you're not living in Pennsylvania and you cannot come here, you can actually just Google them and you can find out which practitioner in your area carries InBody. And then you can go ahead and ask whoever practitioner has it that can I come and get my InBody test done. They might charge you a little fee, maybe whatever, $30, $40, $50, but they let you, get the test done.
So the other question I have is, in mental health, we continue to find a correlation between overeating and maladaptive coping strategies in response to mental issues. And then I also have We see an overstimulation in cortisol due to stress and anxiety and trauma. How can we reduce this part of the treatment program?
So remember that you've just mentioned cortisol and you've mentioned maladaptive eating, right? So the first question is that if your cortisol is being generated by what has happened in terms of your childhood experience or in terms of the trauma, then you have to address that issue. You cannot ignore that issue. And you cannot, even if I'm able to, I'm going to try and reduce cortisol in that patient, but I know that that's not going to be enough because that person will continue to release cortisol because their subconscious is not shutting up. You know, it's constantly putting that person through trauma. They constantly are trying to not think about what's going on inside them. But you can't do that for long. You have to ultimately face it. You have to ultimately have that person get out of that state. So we have strategies through which we reduce cortisol, but there are also strategies that we can help this person get out of that state that they have gotten into for a very long period of time. So imagine that the amount of cortisol this person has generated over their lifetime is a lot. It's been going on for a very long time. It's not going to be easy to reduce their cortisol. But in addition to reducing cortisol, you will have to actually address the root cause. Otherwise, you will not succeed, unfortunately.
What waist size applies to Black women and men?
You know, when I was looking at the data, I think you can work with the Caucasian size because I think the Asian communities are a little different because they are very petite. And that's why they had to have a different number for that. If you have seen the Chinese, Japanese population, and even South Asian population, you know, they are tiny people. And that's why they had to have a different number for the Asians. But in African American community, I can tell you that they are the ones where they have more fat in their butts and their thighs, and that's fine. But the waist size, they should definitely have it below 35.
How do you hydrate your cells if you are drinking? Can you drink? Do you hydrate your cells by drinking water?
Not necessarily. So here is the issue with hydration. So remember that when our forefathers used to drink water from the natural springs would have minerals in it automatically, right? Now what's happening is that, you know, we all have to drink filtered water or bottled water. So bottled water is the worst case scenario because the plastic bottles actually leach out stuff like BP and all that stuff, which actually can make you sick. It can give you diabetes, it can give you heart disease, all kinds of issues. So I'm not advocating drinking from bottled water. But if you get a filter, then what you're going to do is the filter will take out a lot of crazy stuff coming in, a lot of, you know, toxins, but it will also remove a lot of minerals. And so, you know, that is one of the reasons why we are seeing a lot of mineral deficiencies. So one of the things I tell people is that, you know, when you check your nutritional status, you should check your mineral status as well. And if you're somebody who is an athlete, somebody who works out, or somebody who has diarrhea on and off, you are losing more than water. You're losing a lot of electrolytes as well. And so a lot of times in those circumstances, we give our patients certain mineral solutions that they can add to their water. And sometimes what I do, and this is an easy fix unless you can measure your electrolytes, and I just need that for myself, is that, you know, when I've done my exercise and I would take coconut water, and then I would add lemon juice to it, and I would add some salt, a little tiny bit of salt, tiny bit of pepper, and I would drink that. And it's really awesome, and it's hydrating, and it has electrolytes in it. But don't drink too much of it because remember, coconut water also has some sugar content in it. So you don't want to be drinking coconut water day, night, and then, you know, have problem with that. But yes, definitely you have to look at your electrolytes and you have to deplete them.
Okay. What is the impact on the thyroid? And a lot of people face thyroid issues, but little explanation is given, just medicine prescribed.
And I hear you and I'm with you, and I do not necessarily approve of that approach. When we talk about thyroid, you know, it's not about T4 only, like I said. You have to check T3, you have to check reverse T3, which will first of all tell you what is the hormonal issue going on. Secondly, very importantly, you have to look for antibodies. Because if you have antibodies to thyroid, it means you have an autoimmune condition. If you have an autoimmune condition, the first thing you have to ask is, do you have leaky gut or not? And for those of us who don't know, we have actually a webinar on leaky gut that you can go ahead and watch, which kind of tells you what is leaky gut and stuff like that. But leaky gut is the first step towards development of autoimmune diseases. And remember, if you have one autoimmune disease, you can have another autoimmune disease. So thyroid is extremely important for obesity, and it's not enough. Sometimes you have to add T3 to the T4 as well. So that is one of the reasons why when we look at thyroid panel, we look at a complete thyroid panel. We just don't look at TSH or just T4. We look at the entire spectrum of things, including iodine.
Okay. I'm going to combine two questions. One is, what type of pod do you have in your office? Could you speak to that? And number two is, any home infrared units, blankets, etc. recommendations?
No home unit would be able to reach the capacity that of the pod that we have in our office. The one that we have in our office is, I'm trying to remember the name. I think it's the most advanced version that we have, where you actually combine, so we actually reach a capacity, so it goes with low heat, medium heat, high heat, hypothermic, and hypothermic high. So we go all the way to hypothermic high, and we also can go up to, we have vibration intensity can also be increased in our pod. In addition to that, we actually use aromatherapy, which is actually not part of the pod. We actually use separately aromatherapy that we provide our patients. And in addition to aromatherapy, we also use a particular CD for them to listen to, because that changes their brain waves at the same time as they're receiving the pod. So when we are doing the pod, we are working on a lot of different systems at the same time. And we are using a lot more add-ons than just the pod. And unfortunately, most of the stuff that you get at home cannot reach that level. But yes, if you want to buy something and use it, you can, but it cannot be to the degree that you would get through a pod.
Thank you so much, Dr. Ali. You mentioned something about functional testing. Are there any first go-tos, like the GI map or the Dutch test?
No. And this is my biggest issue with my patients who spend a lot of money and resources, and they said, we have had 5 tests, but they did not even need those 5 tests. And so one of the things I would tell you is that you have to first look at the patient to know what kind of testing you want to do. If it would be as easy as that, I would be ordering testing before I see the patient, and I never do that. I have to see the patient in order to know their history from birth, to be able to know what testing do I want. And it's not just even about what testing, it's also about what test. For example, when you talk about GI testing, we have a pH test, we have a urine test, we have a breath test, we have a stool test. And all of them look at the GI stuff, right? And I'm talking about GI stuff from the gut standpoint, because they're outside the gut things which also affect the gut. But the question is, which one do you need? And even in the stool test, there are different types of stool tests. And the question is, which one do you need? So it is not about, and this is where conventional medicine and functional medicine differ. Because no matter which conventional physician you go to, they will order the same type of thyroid testing. But that will not be the case with functional physician. And that is what you have to understand, that the first thing would be to have an understanding of what possible root causes you could be having. And then depending on that, because if your issues are primarily hormonal, that should be addressed first instead of the gut. If your issues are primarily gut, then I would go ahead with the gut issues. So you really have to know the patient. There is no cookie cutter solutions. And I know cookie cutter solutions are very easy to implement. But unfortunately, that is the whole idea of functional medicine, that can you do an individualized approach, or are you going to do a cookie cutter? Because cookie cutter is conventional. Even if you do cookie cutter in terms of supplements, if you give the same supplement to everybody, then there's a problem. You have to change depending on who needs what.
How do you help someone who is on Arimidex due to breast cancer?
I'm not sure. Are we talking about, you mean losing weight?
Anonymous attendee 4:25
Sorry.
p.m.
Yeah, I think for weight loss, I guess if they would have to come off their medication, or would they be able to stay on it?
So I think the first question is that when somebody is on Arimidex, I mean, there are a couple of things we have to understand. Remember that Arimidex came after the cancer, right? But the cancer happened before Arimidex. And cancer is an inflammatory condition. And the question is, did the weight come before Arimidex or did the weight come after Arimidex? If you tell me that somebody has cancer, then they had inflammation to start off with. So yes, Arimidex may be making matters worse, but the matters weren't great to start off with. So it means that you have to ask what was happening before. The second thing you have to ask for is that, you know, what are we going to do about the Arimidex? How long do you need? What is the dose? Can you go with the lower dose? So there are a lot of questions that you have to ask, because a lot of times when we look at oncologists, they're always pushing the envelope, meaning they're giving more than needed. They're not telling you what percentage of benefit would you get. Everybody gets a prescription, they go home and they start taking it. They don't even ask questions. Okay, what percentage of benefit am I looking at? Are we looking at 3 more months? Is that why you're giving me this? So you really have to ask the right questions. You have to question the dose as well. And then you have to ask, is this situation just Arimidex related, or some things have been happening before that? And so all of that has to be taken into account before you put all the blame on one thing. I have to tell you one thing. One of the things I've noticed in my practice is that it's never a single variable. Never, ever. Even though the patient will come and say, Dr. Ali, I think it is that. Well, you think it is that, it might be that, but it might not just be the only variable. And so a smart functional physician will not just look at one variable and be happy about it. If I do one variable, it comes out negative, I will not stop my search. I will do my search till I find every single variable. And I will turn every single variable to normal. And I will not sit still till I have achieved that. Because if you leave anything unturned, it will then continue and have an effect. And I don't want my patient to come back and say, oh, why is this happening again? No, you're going to fix it all and get it over with.
How to help a schizophrenic obese female lose weight?
First of all, you know, the part that I don't like about conventional medicine is that you will label everybody. Schizophrenia, obese, like, so what is schizophrenia? Schizophrenia is simply an inflammation of the brain. And we now know that she's obese, so she already has inflammation. So I don't think I would treat a schizophrenic female any different than I would treat another female who has a mental health disorder, okay? And so that has nothing, that it does not make this matter complicated. The important part is that we have to find the root cause of inflammation and then address that. The important part is that how willing is this female to change whatever needs to be changed. And remember that humans have immense healing capacity. So until and unless you put the word impossible in your dictionary, nobody can do that for you. So it is not like if you're schizophrenic, so you cannot lose weight or anything like that. Anybody can lose weight. This is not rocket science. Provided you are willing to do the work, you're willing to put in the effort, and you're determined to move forward. That's all.
What is the most effective way to get rid of candida?
That is not even the right question to ask. Why? Because it's not about what's the right way to get rid of it. Why did it get there is the question. Why did your immune system not take care of it is the question. That is the question. Because if you don't take care of that, it does not matter how hard you try and how many ways you try. It will come back. It's a survival game. Everybody wants to survive, and everybody will put up their best fight to survive. So when we see people with candida, when we see people with SIBO, we don't start treating them with antibiotics. We never do that. Why? our patients say, Dr. Ali, just let's kill it. Let's get rid of the SIBO. And we're like, no, we're not doing that, because we need to know why. We need to make sure that your immune system is so powerful that even if I try a botanical or a medication or whatever I try, it will be the one and last time, because the immune system would have been so powerful and the candida had been made so weak, it would not resist at all. Because if I don't do that, then you will get better and then you will come back, because now it's again there and now you again want to have treatment. And I'm not interested in losing my weapons, because these fungus and bacteria are very powerful. So if you use a weapon and they develop resistance to it, they're very happy. Next time you cannot use their weapon because they know how to deal with it. So you never want to show your weapons to the enemy, and you only want to show them once. And at that time, when you're showing them, it should be a done deal, meaning your success should be 100% guaranteed. And that is when we start the killing process. And that is the right question to ask. And there are many ways to kill candida, but it will depend on the person. What is the degree of tolerance? What have they tried before? What has worked from before? What is the degree of leaky gut? What is the urine dysbiosis showing in terms of how much of toxin is being released? All of those need to be considered when you are coming up with a protocol for candida. It is not one size fits all, and it will never be one size fits all.
Is there a link between hypothyroidism and low vitamin D levels?
Hypothyroidism and vitamin. So vitamin D is actually one of the nutrients that is needed for making thyroid hormones. So making of thyroid hormones needs vitamin A, it needs iron, it needs iodine, it needs vitamin D, it needs B vitamin. So a lot of vitamins are needed for making of the thyroid hormone, by the way.
Thank you. And then one more question, and I do see someone's hand raised. Is obesity considered a mental health problem?
No, not at all. I don't think obesity is a mental health problem, but obesity can lead to mental health problem. You know, somehow we actually, like I said before, the people blame the victim. They say, oh, this must be a crazy person and she keeps on eating or he keeps on eating. No, obesity is a problem which can lead to any and every problem in the body because it causes inflammation. It's not a mental health problem. It's not a mental health problem. And the person who is eating, you know, without ceasing, or the person who cannot stop eating, they may be doing it because they may have trauma, they may have abnormal relationship with food, but that's not their fault. You have to understand it's not their fault. They're not doing it because they want to do it. There's something going on inside them which is making them do what they are doing. You find out what it is. You find out what it is and you correct that. Do not blame the victim. Do not play the mental health card. You know, find out what mental health issues are they having. Why are they having those mental health issues? Address that.
If a female was to do the body mass analysis test and they did it at different points in their cycle, how much would that change and what would that kind of look like if they had inflammation issues?
So the one thing that would change would be the total body water to extracellular body water ratio. But the fat mass and lean mass will not change. But the water will change, because what happens is that, you know, like a woman would say, like, you know, when I'm close to my period, then I suddenly become so bloated, like I can see my stomach coming out as if I'm pregnant. And so what has happened? Obviously, it's not fat and it's certainly not lean mass. It's basically either gas or it's water that's there. And if you have inflammation, a lot of times we have water accumulation, and we see water accumulation around periods, around ovulation. And so that is what is going to change. And it depends on the person. If that person is having significant PMS issues or significant issues around the ovulation, then there could be a significant change in the extracellular to total body water. So the best thing is not to do it at that time. The best thing is to do it, you know, before your ovulation and after your period, which is what we call the follicular phase.
Thank you so much. And that concludes today's question and answer session. I would like to say if anybody has any questions for my mom or Dr. Ali, any last minute question, I'll leave it open for another minute. Because I wanted to take this time and say thank you all for coming, and it's been so wonderful. And I can't thank you guys enough for the chats that you've left and the questions that you've given. So thanks again.
Thank you all. Thank you, Christine. Bye-bye.
Thanks all.